off of master runs, I'm going to make them eat strawberry preserved scrambled eggs. Strawberry preserved scrambled eggs. Yes, it's as nasty as you're probably thinking it is. could have saved that if I had just popped that Team Orange. Friggin'.
Alright. Alright, I could have saved this run if I had the inspiration table up, and if I had popped either the Team Orange or the Team Escape, since I didn't realize that he was stunned and couldn't heal. I hadn't even looked to see what power sets that tank is. Okay, that's a fire armor tank. Ugh. I'm gonna be kicking myself because that didn't have to happen. Could have also saved it if I was running regrowth instead of rebirth. And I'm kind of tempted to uh, swap out of rebirth and into regrowth. I mean, rebirth is more tactical, more deliberately useful. But for Master of Runs, where there are no incarnate powers, the slow heal time on Rebirth. I mean, Rebirth has a what's our recharge right now? We're rocking 44 seconds on the recharge time. All right, so practically speaking, the best way to play this character for Master Runs going forwards is to do a dual build that swaps regrowth for entangling aura. I also, whoever decided, I mean, really, whoever made the decision that Master of Run should have no incarnate powers should be made to eat strawberry preserved scrambled eggs. That's as nasty as you think it sounds. I'm just, and part of that is because ever since incarnate powers were introduced. Okay, I'm stunned. Let's click that and let's back up a bit. And let's get my healing field in. I kind of want my healing field to be able to heal me and heal the melees, but it may not be far enough for that. The thing is, ever since incarnate powers were introduced, they were allowed on Master of Runs. And it was only recently that a Homecoming developer made the decision that to disable uh, incarnate powers on Master of Runs when used in Master of Settings. I don't agree with that. I think it fundamentally breaks the game as players expect it to be played. Okay, now fair enough, you shouldn't get the level boost. I mean, if you want to turn the level off, but what this basically does is it forces players to create alternate builds that are only for Master of Runs and will never ever be used in any other scenario, period. Anyways, it's and the thing is, it wouldn't bother me so much if it weren't for the fact that some ATs are simply not feasible in Master of Runs without incarnate powers. Masterminds in particular are not valid for Master of Runs unless they have some incarnate powers. Uh, Some of the epic archetypes are really not they really don't have the power sets, the pool capabilities, the enhancement capabilities to really be a factor in Master of Runs without incarnate powers. Everyone's is Gur already down? I think Gur's already down. So it's kind of frustrating that somebody decided, you know what, all Master of Run should have incarnate powers turned off. Oh, there he is. Okay, let's shut this. Let's shut Griffalcon down real quick. Okay, Griffalcon's about. As soon as we get into Scourge, I can make quick work of him. I'm completely pissed off that I didn't read the situation correctly for what was going on, and I didn't take action that I could have taken to have pulled this Master of Run off. And I'm equally ticked that very bad decisions were made on the part of the Homecoming developers. And just very bad decisions. It's like I'm having to fight the urge to launch into a rant about why taking incarnate powers away. The thing is with Master of Runs is that they are supposed to be uh they are supposed to I'm trying to figure out a way to play this. They are not supposed to be an abnormality. They are supposed to be something that you can realistically achieve with characters you actually play. In fact, the live developers, in this case Paragon Studios, admitted that adding the no death component to Master of Badges was a big mistake. And part of the factors where they admitted that it was a big mistake, wow, even that wasn't enough. Where they again where Paragon themselves said admitted that the Master of Badges with deaths was an error, was especially came in regard to two specific armor sets, fire armor and dark armor, and to an extent, regeneration and willpower, although not as much. Fire Armor's strongest attack is Rise of the Phoenix, a power that requires the player to die. Now, keeping this in mind, that the strongest attack fire armor characters get is an attack that requires their defeat. Uh, how practical is it to bring along to bring along a fire armor on a Master of Run when the when 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 Rise of the Phoenix is part of their attack chain? Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And on the live servers, if you were a fire armor, you could not get on a Master of Run. In fact, if you join a Master of Run on some servers and they saw that you were a fire armor, you would be kicked from the team because you were absolutely useless. Defeat was part of your attack chain. That was how you laid down damage, and Dark is in the same boat. Dark's most powerful status effect is achieved through the through their self res soul transfer, which is a powerful stun. And so Dark Armor's part of their attack chain, how they actually play is that they let themselves get defeated, then they soul transfer, come back up, and now they're back to full health, they're back to full status, they're back to whatever, and off they go. It's part of how the power set is played. And then you have regeneration, which has a revive built in. And again, regeneration players would just dive headfirst into battle because they would just revive in the middle of the battle and get right back into the fight. Is how regeneration played. Willpower has a self res. You get defeated, and willpower has regeneration basically as its primary. Okay, we got Vanessa coming in. Got to keep an eye on her. First time I ever saw her called Nessie, but okay. Anyway, so willpower gets a lot of regeneration. Now, if you can work your rise to the challenge placement in specific circumstances, you can get a lot of mileage out of rise to the challenge. And if you were, say, in STF, when you're facing off against Lord Recluse, if you can get Lord Recluse up against one of the towers and one or two enemies along, you may have the regeneration to simply withstand channel gun and the melee attacks. And that's something that's kind of important to. Anyway, sorry, I'm trying to juggle too many things. Anyway, so that's kind of. There are some ways in which regeneration's weakness or regeneration's whole that it needs enemy close to it can be arranged, but in some cases, such as say against Reichsman, Uh, there are no enemies around other than the other arc villains who you really want to drop as soon as you can. So if you're trying to drop these other enemies as soon as you can, uh, it doesn't really take a mathematical equation to figure out that, maybe making no deaths part of the strategy when you have power sets that are specifically built around they do something when they defeat it because they simply can't reach the survivability of other sets, you got kind of a problem. And of course, how the developer who set up the original master of requirements justified, and we'll put quotes on justified the decision to make no death part of it. The no death would encourage teams to force multiply and put together specific teams that would be capable of performing this feat. Yet therein lies the problem. Specific teams, specific power sets, specific mitigations. Which is fine if you've got a server with lots of players and everyone has lots of high level, max level, fully optimized characters that they can bring. Hey, that's great. They can maybe pull that off. But you lock out other players, other characters, other avatars who simply don't have that mega end, ultimate be all, sustain all build. You've basically locked them out. And what if they're on a small server where there's just not a whole lot of other players around? Well, now you've kind of screwed those players over. And that was why Paragon allowed incarnate powers to be used on Master of runs. Because it was the balancing factor that allowed small player servers to be capable of running content uh, that larger server players. Well, I ran out of endurance, so not good. Anyways, It was the equalizer, and it also opened up the gates for avatars and characters who maybe weren't so effective on a Master of Run because they didn't have that exact mix of desirable power sets. Well, they could bring something that maybe wasn't ideal, but it would still be useful. And to take incarnate powers away, this severely harms low population servers. This severely harms players who don't play at the same time that anybody else plays. It it's basically a giant middle finger screaming F you to players who want to play what they want to play, not the flavor of the month and not the specific archetype or a specific power set that are required to achieve a specific goal. It's mean spirited, it's completely counter to the entire rest of how City of Heroes is generally played or generally considered. Uh, and is one of the most petty, self serving, short sighted. It is an extraordinarily bad choice. And made probably by somebody who doesn't legitimately understand the history of the game, doesn't understand the intent of why decisions were made in the past, doesn't understand. And this isn't just a reflection on the Homecoming developers, or this is also a reflection on Cryptic and Paragon. And a good example in case is the tertiary power and the energy pool focused accuracy. Now, if you've been around in the game long enough, you probably know that focused accuracy was originally designed as the counter, the deliberate in-game answer to the Nemesis Vengeance stacking. It was how players countered Nemesis Vengeance. It was how players countered Rickety drones. It was a power specifically created to be an anti defense weapon. And to go along with that, it had a ludicrous amount of endurance consumption. I have no idea if I need that salvage or not. Ugh. But then somebody came along and said, "We're going to change focus accuracy." So they changed it, and they turned it from an excellent utility with a very specific purpose, countering Nemesis stacking vengeance defense, countering Rickety drones, countering force bubble stacking, countering all the stack defense in the game for armor types. It turned it into power that couldn't do any of that. When the power was rebalanced, or in this case, massively nerfed, it was done by a developer who didn't understand the intent. They didn't know why that power was made, and because they didn't know why the power was made, they completely bungled, botched, blew it because they weren't willing to go, you know what, this is a specific power, we're just going to leave it alone because it's a specific power for a specific set of circumstances. Let's let it do its job. And that's the same thing here with taking incarnate powers away from Master of Runs. It's completely ignoring, not just ignoring, it's completely rejecting the actual history of the game and the decisions made by the original developers and why they decided to make those decisions. It's not just blindsided, it's a complete rejection of the development philosophy that, okay, fair enough, there are some massive issues with the way that Matt Miller, aka Positron, intended to run the game. And it's not unfair to say that City of Heroes succeeded in spite of Matt Miller, not because of Matt Miller. So keeping that kind of in mind, uh, it's looking back and you're looking at the development trajectory. What decisions were made in order to make the game more accessible and less clique driven? What gave players the flexibility to be a superhero? What gave players the flexibility to be powerful? And taking incarnate powers away from Master of Attempts completely ruins what was admittedly a basically an admission that okay, we screwed up how we think these badges should be approached because our power sets don't account for this kind of play style. And instead of, okay, at that time, it would have made more sense from a development perspective to have actually changed Fire Armor, Dark Armor, and all the sets with the Revive, changed the anti-Mez sets that were in use by Defenders, Corruptors, Controllers, and Masterminds. It would have made sense to, do those modifications there instead of saying, okay, we'll just patch it in the incarnate powers. But that's not what happened, and that still hasn't what happened. It'd be one thing if every Defender, Corruptor, Mastermind, Controller has an anti-mez. If that anti-mez was team, just flat team, you clear mind one player, you clear mind the team. I mean, if you did that, it wouldn't be the emphasis on Clarion would go away overnight. It would go away in that patch. But that's not what Paragon did, primarily because of Matt Miller. And it's not what the Homecoming devs did when they said, okay, no incarnate powers are Master of Runs. It's a blindingly short-sighted rejection of how the game progressed and how players got to the point where this was the kind of game that they wanted to save. Now, I'm going to end the rant here because I'm about to go into a passive farm and start working on some more incarnate salvage because I kind of wanted to see what the character would look like once I actually had some incarnate powers in place. And looking at my combat attributes, we are presently, I've got an agility T3, and currently we are 43, 44, 45. Where are we on ranged? We're not doing so great on range, but I didn't think we were. So smashing lethal, we're almost into soft cap there. We are into soft capped on. We are in a soft capped on energy. So I think once we get up to the T4 incarnate, T4 alpha, and we right now we're at defense buff by 20%. Defense buff will still be 20% on the T4, but more of the T4 will show through. So we'll see what that looks like. And I may or may not fling this at the homecoming developers because either they've got to admit that they screwed up, or I'm just going to do what I've done before and do a 2-hour long lecture on why they screwed up, and then just go throw it in their forums, and then they have to look at the player base and go, yeah, we were told this was wrong, but we did it anyways. Yeah, duh. I'm Aurian Archive. I'll catch